Welcome to a special podcast series brought to you by Clary, where we're here to spread the insights and expertise given at our hosted event. Charge at Dreamforce. We've gathered revenue leaders from across the industry to provide you with valuable insights, strategies, and knowledge that can supercharge your revenue growth. These bonus episodes will be dropping on Wednesdays, designed exclusively for you. If you like having more revenue insights in your podcast feed, let us know so we can do more bonus content for you in the future. Let's dive in.
We're going to talk about creating pipeline. And so we want to say, okay, if we're prospecting into HubSpot, which has 10,000 employees, multiple products, global organization, what is the first step and how should we get started? So the top challenge is, Nick, I'm going to kick it with you. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Imagine you've been prospecting HubSpot.
Okay.
You finally connect with the VP that you've been chasing for weeks on a cold call, but she says she already has a vendor that they're happy with. How do you respond to that?
All right. So this objection that you're getting there is a function of how you're explaining what you do. And this is actually a common trap that a lot of salespeople fall into. When they explain what they do and they pitch to a prospect, they categorize themselves. So if I cold call you, Devin, and you're this VP at HubSpot, and I say, hey, this is Nick from Clary, and we're a revenue platform that can help you with A, B, and C, right? Can help you with your forecasting and your prospecting and with your conversational intelligence, whatever. Well, I'm instantly putting myself into a box. I said, we're a revenue platform. Or I say, we help sales teams X. The second that I do that, you're categorizing me and saying, where does this fit into what I know? And anytime that I'm prospecting, anytime that I'm sending a cold email, anytime that I'm making a cold call, I do not want to talk about us. I don't want to talk about my value proposition. I'm going to throw my value proposition in the trash. I actually want to attack the problems that we solve. And so instead of saying, hey, Devin, we're a revenue platform, I want to say, Devin, the reason I'm calling you is I talk to a lot of sales leaders that are frustrated with how challenging it is to balance creating new pipeline and advancing current pipeline right now, because it's really tough to build pipeline, but you still got to move deals forward. I'm wondering if you're even dealing with any of that. I've not said what we do. I've not put myself in a corner. And that keeps me from getting that, we already have a vendor for that objection.
I like it. Lynn, you sell, I'm going to say it, you sell the hell out of Clary. Is that something that works for you? Do you do this?
Yes. So I would say not only do I do it from that angle, but also think about the processes that go into that. So especially thinking of a revenue platform, there's a lot of change management that might happen or unfamiliarity with a certain process. There's different innovations that are happening. And one thing that I like to do with that is how do we look at your process and figure out what is going to work for you and what you're actually hoping to achieve versus, hey, this is what we do. This is what typically happens in your organization. It's like, every organization is different. We can't blanket one thing for everybody.
I like it. I'm going to stick with you, Lynn. So, okay, we imagine that Nick's objection handling works. He gets the meeting, but...
It's a dream.
Sorry?
In a dream.
And so you get the meeting, right? But Lynn, we're going to move to you. There's thousands of employees at HubSpot. And if you use LinkedIn Navigator, it's going to tell you there's at least 150 decision makers in that little feature that they have. So what's kind of your next play here in terms of getting more people involved in this deal?
Yeah. So for me, it's figuring out who matters and why. And at the end of the day, the project that you're hoping to deliver is going to impact a lot of different folks. And so just learning how it's going to impact somebody and who else should care. The way that I go about that is I start with my champion or my executive leader who I'm working with, ask them, who's helping with go-to-market strategy, who's helping with marketing and connecting the dots with sales, who's helping with actually coaching your reps efficiently and measuring that, who's building the process all around that. There's all these different areas that could impact a BI report, right? Like, how do we make that a lot more efficient, a lot faster to serve to everybody? And so working with your EB or working with a decision maker specifically on, hey, what else should we be talking about? This is obviously one problem, but it could trickle into these 10 different areas. What does that mean for you as a leader? And how does that impact you working with someone else? And so once you educate yourself on how does the cross-functional partnerships work within the organization, then I go in with the value that I can serve for each one of those people.
I like it.
Usually like to ask for the intro also. That's probably why my deals move a lot faster. So being very bold about why it's important for me to be introduced by him to be able to carry that conversation efficiently.
Armond, we're gonna move over to you, right? So now we've had a conversation, we've had some objections, like we're navigating, but I don't know if you know, like HubSpot's located in Boston, and Boston, I don't know if it's in Bostonians, they can be a little rough around the edges. They can be a little mean. You seem really nice. They can be a little harsh. So imagine, Armond, you're trying to widen that net, right? Maybe you have the good intro, the value props, and your cold email gets the reply, yeah, I don't care. We're on a spending freeze. We're not buying anything right now. How do you reply to that? Because you've got some good value props going.
So it's a bunch of nonsense whenever you get a response that sounds like we're not purchasing software. No one is in the market for software. People are in the market to solve their problems. So the 3 phases of this can be, number 1, get in. Number 2, get wide. And then number 3, get out. Okay. So the one that people oftentimes over-rotate on is the get in. And get in would be handling that objection. And my favorite way to handle that objection is with the Mr. Miyagi method, which would be to agree with the objection, pull more information, and then get a little bit more information to sell a meeting. So I might say something along the lines of, hey, Devin, I totally get it, right? Now, even keeping a tool is more difficult, let alone asking to buy a new one. So I've agreed with your objection. Number 2 is I might pull more information. And I might say, hey, just so no one else like that Nick guy reaches out to you again, could you give me a sense of, is it just budget is out this cycle? Or is it any sort of spend whatsoever is completely off hold? And then once I get that reply, what I'm going to say from there is I'm going to say, awesome. Hey, my guess is you're not going to buy anything today. But Devin, would you be completely against taking a look? Not for now, but maybe for when things open up next year. And so I'm removing the pressure of the sale today to get in. But that is probably of the 3 tactics the most useless. And the reason for that is when someone says, I have no budget or I'm not buying software, they're either not interested or they don't have budget. And so step 2 is get wide. So HubSpot did not say no. This person at HubSpot said no. Honeywell does not say no. One person at Honeywell says no, and that is a 10,000+ employee company. So keep prospecting wide. And then the third is get out. Is if you get no budget from 5 people, your territory is an inverted funnel today. It's the 20-80 rule, not the 80-20 rule. 20% of your territory will produce 80% of your revenue. And if you truly find that they have no budget, go stack all of your efforts on the 20% of your territory that does have money.
I like the energy that you brought on that. Just some passion.
Energy drinks with Nick over
You
there,
had how many monsters have you had this morning?
Did you say you had Linergy this morning?
I had big Leonard.
All right, I like it. So we get wide, we get extreme curiosity. Let's wrap up the create phase and let's move over to convert. So let's imagine all of this works, right? We've had some conversations, some discovery calls, maybe a couple demos. And now maybe even run a POV. You run a POV? Yeah? Or POV, proof of value. Okay, so imagine we're kind of like in that mid-funnel stage, but we need to convert it. We need to get it past the tipping point and towards the close here. But there's always some challenges in navigating deals. Armond, I'm going to stick with you for a second here. Imagine, you've got multiple points of contact, right? Maybe even have, maybe even texting basis on a couple of these people, right? But, you're in a forecast meeting or a kind of pipeline review with Nick, and you're like, truth be told, I don't have a champion. Might have a coach or two, but how are you going to move forward and move this deal forward and get a true champion?
All right, so I'm big on splits, right? So you have the get in, get wide, get out. This is a double split. So if someone isn't a champion, it's either because they can't or they won't. They can't or they won't. Let's start with the can't. Someone can't be a champion if they don't know how to drive a buying process, or they don't have the ability or the political capital to drive a buying process, right? So they might know the buying process, but they can't actually push it forward. So early, mid, and late stage in your deal, there are different ways to test for this. Early stage in your deal, I've actually learned this from one of our wonderful guests from Clary on the podcast, is ask questions 1 level up. So if I'm meeting with a head of content marketing, I might ask them one question 1 level up to the CMO. And I might say, hey, Devin, how does someone like Kyle think about this problem, right? And if Devin can't give me a good answer on how Kyle might think about this problem, right? I'm like, okay, is Devin really in the know in the organization, right? That's early stage in your deal. Mid stage in your deal, you can ask about process, and you can just simply ask questions around, hey, typically when you've gone through a legal process or typically when you've secured budget, can you give me a sense of what that typically looks like, right? And if you get answers like, oh, I send it to legal and they'll send it back to me, or, oh yeah, I'm sure we go to finance and I'm sure they'll be fine with it. If I get very low level answers or thin answers, to me, that's a sign that I don't have someone who can be a champion, okay? The trickier one is when they won't be a champion. So if someone won't be a champion, there are a couple different reasons this might happen as well. If someone won't be a champion, it might be because you didn't give them the chance to become a champion, okay? And what that means is you need to do something that's called the champion sandwich. And the champion sandwich is not the champion meatloaf, okay? The champion meatloaf is when you carry all of your stakeholders across every single meeting, okay? So a champion meatloaf means I meet with 7 people at HubSpot or 4 people at HubSpot every single meeting. And so someone has to stick their neck out of the room to become the champion. So I'm going to take my pass at who I have the highest conviction that can be my champion, and I'm going to isolate them in the champion sandwich. In other words, before the big team meeting, I'm going to meet with them before and after that meeting one-on-one to get on the same side of the table as that person. And that is the way that you isolate a champion and say, hey, can you help me be the champion of this thing? Because oftentimes people just hope that someone will jump or thrust themselves onto the stage, and that's not how it works.
I've done the meatloaf approach in my career, and what I found, I'm curious to you too, is like you can exhaust people who are like genuinely interested, really engaged, want to be part of the buying process, but they don't want to meet with you for every single meeting across the whole buyer process.
Bingo, 100%.
Yeah. All right, sandwiching. All right, so Nick, this one's for you. As you talk to people across the department, right? So you got your champion sandwich, but you're still staying multi-threaded here. You're getting mixed signals on what the buying process is. Some people are saying go left, other people are saying go right. Some people are still saying they don't have budget. What do you do to clarify the buying process?
My goal here is I want to get to the truth. The way that I'm going to get to the truth is I am going to first be okay with whatever the truth is, which might be the fact that there is not a deal here, Devin.
Yeah.
And so step 1, I'm going to pick up the magic device called the telephone. Step 2, I'm going to call whoever, to Armand's point, I have the best relationship with, my champion. And they might not be a real champion there yet, but whoever I feel like is actually going to be honest with me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw myself almost under the bus where I'm like, I'm going to call you, Devin, right? I'm going to say, hey, Devin, do you have a sec to chat? Yeah. You know, I feel a little bit silly here, but I feel like I don't really have a good sense of like where you all are and what your evaluation process looks like for this. And I want to make sure that I'm not dragging you through the mud and making you do a bunch of meetings that aren't going to take you anywhere. Can you help me clear things up? And all I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, like, I feel a little embarrassed, but I'm confused. And when you reach out and ask for some help, you'd be amazed how many people actually help you, because I think there's a lot of salespeople that think they're successful in sales when they're charismatic and good looking and they've got a lot of bravado. And like, I'm not very good looking. I'm not very good at a lot of those things, Devin. And when you admit that, hey, I'm not perfect, I'm a little bit confused here, 99% of the time, people are going to be like, let me help you out. Yeah. Let me give you a sense of that. However, I'm not just being, oh, I have no clue what's going on, I'm a bumbling, stumbling idiot. I need to have in my mind, here's what I think your evaluation process should look like. So if I get with you, Devin, and you're like, yeah, I don't really know either. I know we got to solve this problem, and I know we've got to get Lynn involved, and we probably need to get Andy involved at some point, but I just don't even know how we're going to get there. I need to be prepared to say, hey, would it be helpful for me to talk through how most folks think about navigating this process or making this decision or evaluating this tool? So I'm doing 2 things here. One is I'm saying it's okay that I don't know everything, But if you're like, I do want to go on this journey with you, I am prepared to say, hey, here's my recommendation for how we do it together. It's two sides of that coin.
I was smiling and laughing at the first part of that answer because I've bought from Nick 3 times. And I'm like, damn it, you played me like a fiddle.
I feel really confused, Devin. How do you
I get a lot of phone calls from confused Nick. Now I know why. I like it. I've done something similar, but it's like kind of like after I haven't done the kind of throw myself on the bus approach. But when I do get those conversations going, what I call it is triangulating the truth, which is I ask the same set of questions to multiple different people to start to figure out where there's kind of like a break in the truth, right? And the truth is, prospects lie to us a lot, but they're not intentionally lying. They're just giving like you said, it's like false information, what they think to be true. And so if you can ask the same set of questions to multiple people, where you start to see that break is where you can really dig in, kind of do some of the things you're saying, ask elevated questions, start to figure it out. And to your point, say maybe there is no process, or at least get a better vision for what is.
Well, the other thing that you're doing there is it sounds like you're actually having multiple conversations with folks about the process versus I think a lot of salespeople over-rotate into every single conversation that they have has to be about, I'm going to sell the value of Clary. Every single conversation is, I'm taking you through a discovery framework and I'm going to pitch all of the value that we have for your organization. And there's not enough conversation about like, how are we actually going to go through this together? So you need to spend time selling value, but you also need to spend time talking about how are we actually going to go about this? What's the process going to look like?
I like it. All right, Lynn. You're up next. So we've got imagine this is all, we're moving forward in time and space, right? And this is working. We've got our buyers, our process kind of figured out. Now imagine, Lynn, the prospect is clearly interested, right? They've told you flat out that they want to move forward. They're kind of being like non-committal, being a little fluid on timeline, right? And you've got, I don't know, a couple of weeks coming until the end of the quarter and you think you can get this thing done. But without a timeline, you might be a little stuck. What do you do?
Big shout out to my guy Tom in the crowd because I use a line, it's self-plug on Clary, but the way that I go about this is if you don't have a timeline, but you know that you want to move forward with something, like let's put some concrete milestones about what does that look like and when does it matter for you. And so one, being able to not only educate yourself on who's in that process, who's going to be involved, but at what point are they involved and how does that matter to the overall business case? So if you start helping your buyer really understand like, hey, what are we focusing on? What are we hoping to achieve? You're looking at 100 billion in revenue next year. Like, how do we get you there faster? And really start to tie what are the concrete milestones that we're working through directly to some of those strategic initiatives that the business is working through. And then layer it on to who's mattering, who's going to be important to each one of those milestones to not only cap off, like, where are you at in the deal cycle, but also how are you going to move forward and close out this one part of it and move to the next. And so, and you think about overall, how are we converting pipeline? It's how do we keep making you move through the process in a way that you feel very comfortable, you feel like it's a natural evolution for yourself. But also, it's not only how do we get to close the deal, but then long-term partnership. What does it look like through implementation? What does it look like for our first EBR together, first renewal together? And so when I build out a mutual action plan, I keep all of those things in mind because I don't want you to just be a customer. Like, I want us to have a really successful relationship together because the next place you go, I want you to be able to use Clary again the same way and feel very comfortable with it. And so in my mutual action plan and the way that I work with my customers and building these milestones and working through them on being very diligent about who's responsible for what and how and why do they care and putting it all in one place. So when you do reach your executive buyer, when you do reach the CFO that's telling you no, you can show your work really simply and say, here's all the calls that we've done. Here's the findings that we have from your team. Here's the process we went through to go through that and really diligently be able to say, like, we've completed this together. And it's not a me selling you. It's we are doing this together because you want to transform the way you're doing business today.
If I could add one thing on this. One thing that I learned from Lynn on our podcast that we call it slingshot selling is if Lynn is meeting with a CRO on day one, you'll get introductions to the head of RevOps, the regional VP of sales, yada, 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 all the other department leads. But in that meeting with the CRO, Lynn will preset the debrief with the CRO and force acceleration with all the department leads. So for example, week one, you might meet with the CRO and you'll be like, I'm going to meet with you again in week 3. And you're forcing speed. at the RVP and the head of RevOps level by pre-setting the backstop. And that's one way you can slingshot your deal through, is you can use power to accelerate your deal and create timeline with them so everyone else moves in line.
I like to use the word power, and that is literally Lynn's last name. Nick, you were going to say something?
Well, what's cool here is now when you reach out to those RVPs, head of RevOps, et cetera, you can say, hey, I'm meeting with Devin again in 10 days. We need to get on this on the calendar now. There's some urgency here, because otherwise it's going to meander and meander and meander. I'm traveling, et cetera. Oh, I can't do this week, whatever. And you're like, there is a deadline and I need to bring your insights to them. What I learned from you is going to inform that meeting, and that gives them some urgency to get with you. The other thing that you're in your prompt, you were like, you don't really know the timeline to actually get the deal done. We talked about like early piece of the deal here, that slingshot piece. The other part here is, again, like I can lean on the, Devin, help me out here. Like I'm a little confused. Like we talked about this goal. We've talked about this outcome you're trying to get to. Talk to me about how you're feeling on timeline. And I'm going to get one of two things from you. You might have a very firm, yeah, we got to get this thing going now. And then I can talk about, all right, let me advise you on here's typically the steps between where we are right now and what usually needs to happen to get you to success, which both includes getting the deal closed and then also the implementation stuff, to your point. I'm not just talking about getting the deal closed, right? So that's if you're like, I got to get this thing done. If I'm not getting, yeah, let's move this thing forward, or I'm not getting a hot timeline, I'm either going to be like, probably don't have a deal here, or I'm going to say, okay, talk to me about what you see happens next. And let's have you talk about timelines. You've talked about wanting to get this thing live. What's a realistic timeline look like for you? Because then I can hear from you. And if I feel like I need to edit your timeline on things, I can. But I don't want to prescribe a timeline to you if I have an opportunity to hear from you first. I would rather get, hey, this is what Devin has in mind, and then make some adjustments than the inverse. Let me tell you what we're going to do, Devin. Now you feel boxed in a corner and you're mad at me.
Yeah. I'm never mad at you, Nick. One of the things you both talked about is kind of like bringing up the buyer's the prospect's previous commitment. You said that you wanted to do this. You told me that you wanted to get it done by this time for these reasons. And it's actually a really strong, kind of like psychological trigger where we like to hold our commitments. We like to do the things that we say we're going to do. And so by doing it subtly, and like you said, not boxing people into a corner, you can kind of remind people like, oh yeah, that's right. I do want this. I did say that. And I therefore do want to continue moving forward, and kind of being transparent with the timeline. All right, that concludes the convert phase. I think the deal's still plugging along here, and we might be getting ready to forecast this thing, which, by the way, we're going to do a group forecast. I'm going to pull all of us. We're going to decide how we forecast this deal, if at all. So that's coming soon. So let's move into the close phase, right? So we've hit our tipping point, right? We've got a good business case going. We've got champions. We've got multiple points of contact. But Armond, as we look to close this thing, we're running into a problem, because our slingshot selling, as you just taught me, it worked, but that CRO is being slippery. And so you've got a good deal here. You've got value. You've got champions probably telling him or her to take this meeting with this Armond guy so you can buy this thing. But imagine you're unable to get direct access to that decision maker. Maybe kind of like that final closing call, if you will. What do you do from there? You can't pin them down.
All right, so the tricky thing is when you're doing retroactive deal saving work late in the deal. So 3 layers to how you can access power at different times of a deal. So number 1 is early in the deal, CEO to CEO. Mid stage in the deal, CRO to CRO. Late stage in the deal, CCO to CRO. Let's walk that through. Step number 1, early stage in the deal. If I have the CEO of Clary send an email to the CEO of HubSpot, even if I don't get a reply, what happens? It's on the radar. I guarantee that deal is on the radar of the CRO every single time. So that's number 1. When the deal is early and when things are going well, get on the radar of power and use your execs to get to power. Number 2, I would do this with my reps when I was the VP of sales over at Pave all the time, is mid-stage in the deal. If, for example, Nick or Lynn is uncomfortable breaking that tension or has tried to break tension with their champion and is not getting access to power, you can use your VP of sales or your CRO to reach out to their CRO as a one-to-one connection. And I would always say, hey, XYZ on my team has been meeting with ABC on your team, right? I wanted to reach out one-to-one, exec to exec, to make you know that we are here to support you. And I'd love to hear your perspective on what we've been talking about and anything else that I can do to help. And it's explicitly not with the champion and not with the AE. I'm creating a safe one-to-one line of connection that preserves the integrity of the other one-to-one line of connection between the champion and the prospect. And the last one is the CCO to CRO, the Chief Customer Officer to the Chief Revenue Officer. So if I still don't have that access to power, but it's a late stage deal, that CRO is probably at least considering, can these folks actually support me? So I can have our Chief Customer Officer reach out to their CRO and say, hey, it sounds like you're considering us. And CCO to CRO, I want to give you a sense of how we support you as an executive. Can I meet with you one-on-one? And that works perfectly in this stage of the deal where it's moving towards the late stages and they're probably talking about implementation and we're down to 1 or 2 vendors at this point in time.
Well, too, because I imagine it takes away some of the risk, right? Because everyone says, okay, yeah, we might sign, but then what? Are we really going to be successful? What's this really going to look like? We've all bought tech that doesn't work, doesn't do what it said it's going to do. So I like that. I like that play. So let's say it works, right? You get our meeting, you get the CCO talking to the CRO, and you get the intro to the CFO, Lynn. Problem is the CFO was a pit bull in a previous life. Not playing ball with you. Says, you know what? I don't have time. I'm going to charge at Dreamforce, actually, so I can't meet with you. Why don't you just go ahead and send me your best and final over email? How are you replying to that? I like the smile that you've already got on, by the way.
Because I love getting that close and then someone telling me no because I love a challenge. So one of the things that I do in order to not only educate the CFO on why it is important for them to meet with me, but understand why they would push back at all. Is it a budget thing? What is it? And I'm not just going to send you my best and final because I might send you a couple SKUs that you don't even care about. I don't want to do that to myself. And so it's one, understanding what does the CFO actually care about? Where can we actually move the needle? Where does this become impactful for them? 2, it's who else cared or who else brought me to the table in order to have this conversation with you? And why is it vital to your business for you to pay attention to? And so pairing those 2 together to help lean in with the CFO, you still might not get there, right? Like that's a best case world. What I then do is start to figure out who else are in their network that can educate them as not the seller on the deal and come from a different place of trust, different place of confidence around what we did or what we accomplished together. And so this might look like a reference call. It might look like a friend of a friend that I saw on LinkedIn that was connected to them. It might be their leadership rolling that back up to them saying, hey, let's just do a complete debrief call together around what we've already accomplished and how this is impactful for the finance team.
I like your answer, specifically the beginning part, because when you're saying what you would say to the CFO, you said the word you like 10 times, which is fantastic because it's all about you. What do you care about? And I think a lot of times reps probably accidentally say what I want to cover, what I want to show you. So I like the approach that you have there. Nick, you're itching. I see the microphone.
I'm itching because I don't want to handle a pit bull. I want the folks that I've talked to during this entire deal cycle to go talk to the pit bull. So the second that I get that email, I'm calling you, Devin. I'm calling my champion. I'm saying, hey, I just got this. Yep. It sounds like they don't want to talk to me. They'll talk to you. You work with them. You're your colleague. And if I do have levers I can pull, okay, if they want a better unit cost, maybe they can sign a longer contract or they buy more volume. Or if they want a shorter contract, okay, can we change something else in the agreement? There's always levers that you can pull where you have a give forget. But I don't even have someone who's willing to speak with me. And I'm sure as heck not putting that in an email, throwing something over the fence that's they're going to get confused. We're going to have 42 back and forths. That is a bad situation. So before I even get into the technical aspects of the negotiation, I have to deal with the psychological and the social dynamics that are at play here. And I need to get someone who works at that org advocating for me. So I'm going to you and I'm saying, Devin, we can do this one of 2 ways, right? You go have the conversation with the CFO and you can explain the levers available to them and I'll explain to you and I'll coach you. Or you go to them and explain, hey, we need to meet. There's more complexity here than Nick just like slashing the price 18% and us getting this thing done.
Yeah. I think it's important we all want to be in the meeting as a seller, right? We always want option 2, like get me in the room. The tough part is like, how do you enable that buyer to like,
Yeah.
you know, what, like telling them what to say to the CFO to get them to go, oh, that's right, we do want Armond in the meeting.
But
I
you-
actually played dumb in my career. Was like, look, there's like some stuff about this, honestly, I don't understand fully. Like, and you have to play that smart, but like the ins and outs of their contract, like, no, I don't know that well. Like, let's get an expert to help us walk through it.
Yeah.
That's worked for me.
I'm itching. Even if I'm in that room,
Scratch away.
even if I'm in that room, right? So you say, Nick, all right, I'm going to get you a meeting with CFO. And then it's you, me, CFO. I want you talking more than me.
Right.
I'm game planning with you. I'm coaching you because you know the CFO and you know their style. You know the internal language that you all use to describe the way that you all do business. And you are trusted. You're on their team. And so I want you to be coached and explaining things.
Right.
And I'm there for backup or if you need to lean on me. And I'm there to facilitate the conversation. But if I'm at this stage where the CFO is approving something and we're negotiating and I don't have you advocating and to some degree, we're in trouble, man.
I like that you said facilitate, because I think most sellers feel like they need, like, no pun intended, I say it all the time, take charge and like really lead that meeting and sometimes dominate it. But I think you're right with the facilitating and coaching.
It is always best when you can have, oh, I got louder, I think. I got excited. It's always best when you can have your prospect sell to their colleague for you. Right? I'm going to take you one other scenario. Like if you and I've had a bunch of meetings and Lynn gets introduced and it's the three of us and the first time we're meeting Lynn, I want you catching her up to speed. Not Lynn, let me tell you what Devin and I have talked about. Devin, would you mind catching Lynn up to speed on the conversations we had this far? Because you will always communicate better than I will because you know each other. You're on the same team. You're at the same company.
I'm going to stick with you for our final,
Great.
challenge.
Everyone's
You just
sick of
happen
me
to
up.
have the mic. So, okay, you're in the meeting with the CFO,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I'm in the meeting. I'm in the meeting with you, and you come to terms. Everything's looking good, right?
Yeah.
And you're like starting to feel it. You're itching.
Okay.
But the timeline, the time that they will actually, I'd say, put pen to paper. It's like, you know, sign the DocuSign.
Yep.
They're elusive on the timing.
Okay.
How do you pin that down?
What are they saying to me?
Ooh, you're putting it back on
I'm
me.
putting it back
I
on
like
you.
it.
Yeah, I need some context here.
I don't know. I'm trying to think, like, you know, it could just be, you know, hey, this all sounds good, but, you know, hey, I need to think about it for a little bit.
Okay.
Or, you know, hey, we're just, you know, could be an event that we got coming, you know, and I think some CFOs honestly just kind of make some stuff up to like
Yep.
bide time, right?
Yep.
So I don't think it really matters like what they're saying. They're basically just not, it's less of what they are saying, what they're not saying.
Okay.
Which is giving you that, like, we will sign by the 28th.
I got two pieces of advice here. One, the worst thing you could do in this situation when they say, oh, I got to think about it, right? Is be like, oh, what do you got to think about?
Yeah.
I don't want you trapped in the corner, right?
Right.
If you're not comfortable in that meeting explaining what's going on in your head or you're playing these games, I'm not playing into it. I don't want to be this weird pressure salesperson. Well, what do you got to think? You know, that usually means you either don't have enough information or like, I'm not doing that. That's garbage, right? You're going to be like, who's this joker? So piece one, I'm not going to press into that. Piece two, what I am going to go back on is what you talked about earlier, which was this outcome that we're trying to drive towards
Right.
and this timeline when we've got associated with this. And what I need to do is I need to revert back to my conversations that I've had with Lynn, your CRO, and when you guys are planning to get this thing live and the work back timeline from that. And then I need to set a realistic expectation that, okay, if you need to be live Jan 1 and this takes 45 days to implement, that probably means that you need to have something executed in place by Y
Right.
date. Okay. And so now this is no longer about me getting the deal done because the CFO doesn't care about when Nick gets the contract signed. CFO cares about when Lynn gets to success.
Right.
And so I need to associate any pressure that I put on your signing timeline with the pressure of the needs of your business. And so that's how I orient you to a timeline to sign.
If I can double down on
I was gonna
Oh,
say.
the mic's raised.
The
I love
double
that.
down.
I'm ready.
Who's louder?
So, Lynn, you first.
I was going to say one thing that I do with that though is I also lean into the fact that they said no. Okay, don't sign it. Let me tell you what the cost of doing nothing is, because that's going to be a lot scarier than you signing this document right now. And here's why I say the cost of doing nothing is more vital to you to this business outcome that you're driving and how you're not going to get there if you don't sign this. And so also flipping the script of, hey, let me educate you of what I've done. They already don't care. So you're like, okay, don't care then. What is it if you don't do anything? I'm not here. I'm not going to be in the room. You just told me, no, I'm gone.
Well, they're
Just-
probably expecting like conflict, right? When
Yeah,
they say
they're
that,
not
they're expecting you to
expecting
come
it.
back, and so when you
Right.
kind of,
So
yeah.
it's, but again, what you're doing with that is really digging into what matters to you and why does it matter? And then what is the alternative if you didn't even go with me to begin with? Because there might be another competitor at play at the end that's just taking down one part of it that you could know is something that you want to focus with them as maybe a walk, crawl, run approach. So it's also just flipping it and saying no.
I respect that approach. It takes a lot of confidence, I'd say, to the CFO to do that. I got to go listen to some of your calls and hear how you pull it off. Armond?
Two concepts here. The first is the concept of finding timeline versus driving timeline. You do not find timeline, you drive timeline. You find compelling events. So for example, I might find a reason that you think your Q3 board meeting is just going to be brutal and you need to have clarity in well before that. And I'm going to drive timeline and educate you on how to work backward from that, right? So I'm not asking you, when would you like to have this in place? I'm understanding what is the compelling event or the problem you need to solve. And then I'm going to educate you on what you need to do to solve that problem. That's number one. Number two is, I can tell where this forecast is going to go. This is happening at the wrong stage of the deal, which either means I've mismanaged the deal or this is nonsense, okay? If this is happening at the CFO level, at the end of a negotiation, this is either a hardball negotiation tactic or this is a misplaced negotiation. If I haven't locked down and agreed upon a timeline, I should not be going into conversations with procurement or with finance because I'm supposed to be negotiating commercials for a deal that isn't even locked in on a decision timeframe. And Todd Capone, the author of The Transparency Sale, he talks about sharing openly the levers you can use to buy yourself a discount. And one of those levers is we are willing to pay in return for our business's ability to predict. And early, mid, and late in the deal cycle, we are openly sharing these levers. And if all of a sudden at the end of the deal cycle, a CFO is pretending like timeline doesn't exist, that means I either wasn't sharing those early enough in the deal cycle, or they're trying to create a mixed story as a mechanism to negotiate, and you just take that lever off the table.
I love Todd. Haven't read the book yet, but he's good people. All right, that wraps up close. So now we're going to forecast this thing, and this is where you get to be involved, and everyone has to forecast because you got to raise your hand. You can't get away from forecasting. So I'm going to ask you three to do it as well. So if you're throwing this thing in best case after the CFO call where you get the timeline according to our advice here, you're putting this thing in best case? Best case.
Wait,
the 30 NPC guys all are the podcast guys. Okay, so
and we're doing three categories: best, commit, worst,
and then most likely. I'm doing best case, most likely, and commit.
Okay.
Is that cool with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Most likely.
Best.
Who's putting in most likely? This thing's most likely going to commit. We got 3 people, 4. Okay, most people. What about commit? Like sign it up. This is happening. Yeah, Lynn's like, I got this.
Yeah.
I'm putting it in commit with you. Maybe I got a little happier here, but I'm putting it in commit.
Lynn can put it there. She's a better seller than us.